They took my loyalty for granted, and that was the moment I realized everything I had built for them could be my weapon. My name is Marcus Hayes, and for over a decade, I had poured my heart and intellect into Whitmore and Kane investments. From late nights analyzing market trends to early mornings smoothing over client crises, I had been the silent engine behind their public success. My loyalty was unquestioned. My dedication, relentless. I believed in the company, and I believed in Jonathan Whitmore, the man who had become more than a boss. He was a mentor, a friend, someone I trusted with my career and, at times, my confidence. Jonathan, with his easy charm and polished suits, had a way of making people feel essential, even when they weren't. For years, he had praised my judgment, leaned on my calculations, and entrusted me with decisions that shaped the firm's future. I was the one keeping the wheels from falling off while he took the accolades on stage. The dynamic was clear. I handled the substance, he reaped the shine. But underneath that veneer of mentorship, cracks had begun to form. Small ones at first, my ideas subtly dismissed during meetings, promotions quietly passed over, my access to high-stakes deals restricted under some bureaucratic pretense. I noticed the way Jonathan laughed at others' jokes while ignoring mine, the way he introduced new hires with exaggerated enthusiasm but barely acknowledged my contributions. Still, I told myself it was minor. Perhaps it was stress, or coincidence, or the natural ebb and flow of office politics. After all, loyalty required patience. Or so I thought. The turning point came during a quarterly board review. I walked in, expecting the usual discussion of investments and strategy, only to find that key decisions had already been made, decisions that would benefit Jonathan personally and undermine the departments I had painstakingly cultivated. My projections had been ignored, my advice bypassed. Worse, the board seemed to hang on every word Jonathan said, as if my years of insight had been invisible. In that room, watching the man I had trusted manipulate my work for his gain, I felt a surge of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, cold, calculated anger. The realization settled in like a storm cloud. Loyalty, when taken for granted, could be repaid in kind. As I left the boardroom that evening, the city lights reflecting off the glass skyscrapers, one thought burned through the haze of betrayal: they believed their future was secure. They believed I would remain obedient, silent, invisible. They were wrong. And the quiet tension in my chest whispered a dangerous truth: if they thought loyalty was free, they had no idea what would happen when it was cashed in. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the missed meetings, the overlooked reports, the subtle shifts in tone were just the chaos of high-stakes finance. But the small signs kept piling up, impossible to ignore. Emails I once received immediately now sat unanswered for days, often redirected to other team members. Ideas I had carefully drafted were being presented as someone else's, with minor edits that stripped away my input but kept the conclusions intact. Client reports I meticulously prepared were suddenly altered without my knowledge, the changes just enough to make me look inattentive if questioned. Even my colleagues behaved differently. Junior associates who had always respected my guidance now avoided me, speaking in hushed tones or exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. During team meetings, Jonathan praised Ethan and Claire, the newer hires he had once called green, while I received vague nods or polite acknowledgement, as though my years of service were invisible. The favoritism was subtle, almost imperceptible, but deliberate. It gnawed at me. Jonathan himself started behaving strangely. His charm remained, but it was calculated, perfunctory. Private conversations grew shorter, casual advice replaced by rehearsed platitudes. When I confronted him subtly, he laughed off my concerns, insisting I was overthinking things, that loyalty was sometimes taken for granted in business. But the way he avoided my gaze and redirected conversations suggested otherwise. I began doubting my own perception. Maybe I was too invested, too sensitive. But the pattern was too consistent, too purposeful. The gnawing suspicion burrowed deeper every day, leaving me anxious, restless, unable to sleep. I found myself checking reports obsessively, tracing decisions, following email chains late into the night. My focus wavered, my confidence faltered, and yet I couldn't stop watching the unfolding behavior of the people I had trusted most. Then came the moment that confirmed my worst fears, though not fully, leaving the truth tantalizingly out of reach. I overheard a conversation in the hallway, Jonathan speaking with the board quietly, far enough away that the words were faint but unmistakable. "We can't let Hayes have a say in this merger, he's too loyal to the old guard." The words hung in the air, echoing inside me like an accusation I couldn't ignore. Loyalty, my defining strength, had become the reason I was being edged out. The betrayal was deliberate, premeditated, and though the full scope remained hidden, the intent was clear. I walked back to my office, heart pounding, stomach twisting. Questions spiraled. How far would they go? What had they already done behind my back? And most terrifying of all, when they finally moved, would I have any power left to stop them? For the first time in years, the office felt like a battlefield, and I was surrounded by enemies I had once called friends. The truth hit like a punch to the gut, sudden, brutal, impossible to ignore. Jonathan and the board hadn't just overlooked me or subtly favored others. They hadn't merely dismissed my input. They had systematically manipulated the firm to strip me of authority, credibility, and influence, all while pretending I was still part of the team. It started with a misdirected email, a simple mistake that became the key to unraveling their scheme. The message was titled Final Allocation, Hayes Transition. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Inside, it detailed a series of moves that affected every corner of my work, my responsibilities reassigned to Ethan and Claire, my signature on investment approvals quietly voided, and my access to high-profile client accounts revoked. Projects I had nurtured for years were now credited to others. Even my personal bonuses, the compensation tied to long-term growth, had been frozen and redirected. Shock froze me in place. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. I had trusted Jonathan. I had defended him when whispers of mismanagement circulated. I had stayed late to fix his mistakes, I had kept clients from leaving, I had sacrificed sleep, weekends, even relationships for this company. And now, every ounce of loyalty I had poured in was being used as a reason to edge me out, to erase me, to rewrite the story of my career as if I had never existed. Anger roared behind the disbelief. My vision of the firm, the one I had quietly shaped from the shadows, had been hijacked. My achievements, my ideas, my very reputation, all stolen and repurposed for their gain. I felt the sting of humiliation. I wasn't just replaced, I was erased. And the worst part? They believed I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Heartbreak followed the fury. I had once considered Jonathan more than a boss, he had been a mentor, a guide, even a friend. And the man who had praised my judgment and relied on my counsel had orchestrated my downfall with meticulous care. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't oversight. It was betrayal, calculated and precise. I sank into my chair, head spinning, staring at the screen as my world tilted. The firm I had helped build, the people I had trusted, the loyalty I had given freely, they had all been used against me. And yet, amidst the collapse, a spark of clarity ignited. This was no longer just loss. This was an opportunity. If they thought taking everything from me would break me, they had miscalculated. Every secret, every decision, every weakness they had left exposed in their arrogance could be leveraged. I lifted my head, eyes burning, heart hammering. They thought my loyalty could be taken for granted. They had no idea what happens when loyalty becomes leverage. And in that instant, a silent vow formed, I would make them pay. But how? That question hung in the air, heavy, unresolved, leaving a dangerous suspense. How far would I go, and how devastating would my response be? For 2 days, I drowned in silence. I went to the office, nodded through meetings, and returned home to sit in the dark, replaying every moment of my loyalty, every sacrifice I had made, and every smile Jonathan had given me while he quietly sharpened the knife behind his back. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, suffocating me. But despair doesn't last forever. It either consumes you, or it hardens into something sharper. For me, the shift came late one night as I scrolled through old files on my laptop, files I had kept not out of paranoia, but habit. Buried deep in archived folders, I found the original drafts of contracts, investment models, and client proposals, documents that bore my fingerprints, my calculations, my signature. Versions that predated the doctored ones Jonathan had presented to the board. I leaned back in my chair, the realization washing over me like a cold tide. They hadn't destroyed me completely. In their arrogance, they had left breadcrumbs. Proof of what I had built. Proof of what they had stolen. It was like a switch flipped in my mind. The heartbreak cooled, the anger focused, and the despair transformed into something far more dangerous as clarity. The trigger moment came the next morning. A junior analyst, one of the few who still respected me, stopped by my office. He hesitated, glanced around nervously, and then whispered, "Mr. Hayes. I thought you should know. They've been moving client accounts under Ethan's name. But the clients keep asking for you. They don't understand why you've disappeared." That was it. The betrayal wasn't just internal politics, it was theft that affected real people, clients who trusted me. Jonathan and his allies weren't just erasing my career, they were jeopardizing futures, manipulating trust, and cashing in on lies. I felt something inside me settle, a stillness, a decision as quiet as it was final. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my loyalty for submission. But I knew their system inside and out, every policy, every loophole, every skeleton in every locked cabinet. I had built the foundation they stood on, and now I realized the truth: if I pulled even one stone, the entire structure would collapse. I stood, closed the folder of evidence, and looked out over the city skyline. My reflection in the glass didn't look broken anymore. It looked steady. Focused. The game had changed. I was no longer the loyal subordinate, waiting for scraps of acknowledgement. I was something else now, something stronger. And with a calm, steady breath, I made my decision: I would fight back. Not with anger. Not with noise. But with precision. I would cash out their future the way they had tried to steal mine. The first move would come soon. Revenge wasn't a roar, it was a series of quiet, deliberate moves. After the awakening, I stopped acting like a wounded employee and started acting like an architect of consequences. If Jonathan thought he could siphon my work and sleep easy, he had no idea the blueprint I was drawing. Step 1: Secure the evidence. I spent nights crawling through archives, restoring deleted drafts and pulling metadata from old presentations. The files I'd found before were only the beginning. There were versions with my original calculations, email chains that showed who moved funds and who signed off, and hidden spreadsheets where budgets were quietly rerouted. I handed everything to Maya, a digital forensics expert I'd helped get a role years ago. She worked like a neurosurgeon, stitching back the true timeline. Every timestamp, every revision, every hidden author line became a paper dagger aimed squarely at Jonathan. Step 2: Recruit the right allies. Loyalty makes strange bedfellows when the stakes are high. Ben, once a complacent partner, had been watching the same ugly patterns and finally agreed to hand me meeting notes and private calendar entries showing the board's transition planning. Elena, an investigative reporter with a reputation for demolishing polished facades, wanted proof and promised discretion. I also found a few junior account managers willing to come forward with client emails proving my direct involvement in deals that had been reassigned to others. Each person brought a shard of the whole, and together the shards became a mirror. Step 3: Build the legal scaffolding. Public accusations without legal ballast are whispers that die. I hired Priya, a small firm lawyer who understood the value of timing. She filed quiet preservation orders, prepared subpoenas, and coordinated with a banking compliance contact to freeze accounts the moment the right documents hit the regulator's desk. The idea was surgical, exposure paired with immediate legal pressure so there would be no time for cover-ups or PR spin. Step 4. Bait and timing. Jonathan thrived on spectacle, the gala dinners, the investor tours, the speeches where he framed his future as inevitable. So I designed a stage he couldn't resist. A rumor, seeded through a mutual contact, hinted at a lucrative partnership that required Jonathan's visible approval. Predictably, he sharpened his public schedule, accepting interviews and toasts. While he polished his image, we synchronized our moves, legal freezes, Elena's timed article, and client statements all set to drop at the same beat. Step 5. Rehearsal. We mapped the execution like a military op. Elena would go live the moment Priya filed the regulator packet. Maya's forensic report would be displayed in full, with Ben and 2 account managers ready to corroborate on record. Banks would freeze flagged accounts within hours. No single domino would be enough to be dismissed, the cascade had to be indisputable. All the while, Jonathan lived as if nothing had changed, smiling at lunches, calling me Marcus in that patronizing way, posting triumphant photos. His confidence was our greatest advantage. 2 nights before the strike, we met in a dim room. The USB with the final, irrefutable file clicked into my hand like a key. Elena's tablet glowed with the draft headline. Priya's phone displayed confirmation codes from the regulator. I slipped the USB into my jacket, feeling the weight of everything we'd built. Outside, town cars lined up in front of Jonathan's country club. His calendar pinged with a single alert, investor dinner, 8 p.m. I breathed in, thumb brushing the plastic cap of the USB. 1 step. 1 decision. The table was set. I stepped into the elevator, heart steady, but my thumb still hovered over the cap, and the doors were closing. The night of the gala shimmered with false elegance, chandeliers reflecting polished floors, waiters gliding between tables, and Jonathan Grant, confident as ever, preparing to toast his successful future. He had no idea that every move he had made to erase me was about to be broadcast for all to see. It started quietly. Elena's article went live on major financial news platforms, Whitmore and Kane, the betrayal behind the boardroom. Screens around the gala flickered, and the headlines screamed the truth. Metadata, emails, and financial records revealed Jonathan's deliberate exclusion of me, the reassignment of my work, and the misappropriation of funds. Gasps rippled through the room. Investors leaned forward. Phones came up to capture evidence. Then the legal machinery hit. Priya's team had coordinated with the regulators and banks. Accounts were frozen, documents subpoenaed, and assets flagged. Jonathan's carefully curated empire began to crumble before the crowd and online audience alike. The applause he had expected never came, only murmurs, questions, and disbelief. Maya's forensic report played on the main screen, step by step exposing altered contracts, reassigned client portfolios, and the deliberate erasure of my name. Ethan fidgeted nervously beside him, Claire's smug smile faded. The facade of control, which Jonathan had clung to for years, melted under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Jonathan tried to speak, tried to charm and deny, but the room was deaf to excuses. Every ledger, every email, every client testimony pointed directly at him. He could no longer control the narrative. Investors whispered to each other, phones flashed with news alerts, and the press descended, capturing every stumble. And then came the final, cinematic blow. My name appeared on the main screen, not as a victim, but as the strategist who had orchestrated the revelation. The audience realized that the person they had underestimated for years, the quiet, loyal subordinate, had engineered the takedown. I had turned their betrayal into leverage, exposing them while reclaiming the truth of my work. Jonathan's face drained of color as security quietly escorted him from the room. Ethan and Claire tried to salvage their dignity, but their stolen achievements had no place to hide. The empire that had seemed unassailable was collapsing, piece by piece, all because they had believed my loyalty could be taken for granted. I stood near the back, composed, watching the chaos unfold. No shouting, no gloating, just calm, steady vindication. Every glance, every whisper, every exhaled gasp in the room was proof that the balance had shifted. The table had been theirs, but I had flipped it entirely. In that moment, I didn't need applause. The world had witnessed the collapse, the exposure, and the justice. I had reclaimed my power, my reputation, and my future. They had gambled with my loyalty, and lost everything. The table was mine, and I was no longer invisible. The days after the gala felt almost unreal. Headlines screamed Jonathan Grant's downfall, Whitmore and Kane boardroom scandal rocks investors, assets frozen, partners exposed, loyalty betrayed, justice served. His empire of influence and control, carefully built over decades, had crumbled overnight. Ethan and Claire vanished from the industry, scrambling to salvage what little credibility remained, while Jonathan faced legal scrutiny, frozen accounts, and a tarnished reputation that would haunt him for the rest of his career. As for me, I emerged not just unscathed, but strengthened. My reputation, once shadowed by manipulation and erasure, was now restored and elevated. Former colleagues who had doubted me sought guidance, clients I had nurtured for years expressed renewed trust. I had proven that loyalty, when wielded strategically, could be more powerful than deceit. Life outside the office carried the same sense of reclamation. I slept without anxiety, walked with confidence, and spoke with authority. I had transformed from the overlooked, loyal subordinate into the strategist who had executed justice with precision. Every sleepless night, every pang of betrayal, had forged me into someone unshakable, someone impossible to underestimate. And yet, the most satisfying part wasn't the professional vindication, it was the poetic justice. Jonathan had underestimated the very quality he thought he could exploit, my loyalty. He believed it made me compliant. He believed it made me invisible. But it had been the weapon that brought down the empire he had built on manipulation and arrogance. The poetic justice, quiet and sharp, echoed in my mind. The hands that tried to erase me ended up writing their own downfall. Loyalty, once taken for granted, became the ledger that closed their accounts forever. Now, to you watching this story unfold, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Have you felt loyalty dismissed, taken advantage of, or erased? Share your experiences in the comments, I want to hear your story. And if you crave more tales of betrayal, calculated revenge, and justice served with precision, make sure to subscribe. The world may try to flip the table on you, but the ones who plan wisely will always decide how it falls.